download a podcast.
Hello. Welcome to Actors Anonymous Podcast. I am your host, Sam Quiche. Co-hosting with me, as always, is Mr. Jordan Burbank.
Good to be here.
Good to be here, too.
It's sunny. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, in the studio, it is sunny and beautiful in here.
We removed the roof, and we're doing a new thing here today. If you were listening to us right when we started, we were talking about how our parents listen to the podcast and how
don't.
And or don't.
But support it.
Your mom doesn't listen to it?
My mom will share everything on Facebook, like absolutely everything. She may not even put anything in there. She just might immediately like share it. So people are like, "What is this?" I don't know.
What's her name?
Donna.
Donna, thanks for sharing the podcast. We appreciate it.
Just download it.
Just download it and listen to it. Our sponsor today is Cast It Talent. Cast It is the exclusive partner to Cast It's network of more than 10,000 of Hollywood's top casting directors, producers, directors, and studio execs. And I just read a cool article that they have on their website. It's the do's and don'ts of social media, which I think all actors should definitely check out because sometimes we post things without thinking about it. I know I've had to... Go ahead. You have something.
Argument. Do not be afraid to say what's on your mind. Don't be a bigot. Don't be a bad person.
There we go.
But feel free to speak your mind.
Yes, and I think there's a balance that you have to achieve with that. Would you agree, Jordan?
To an extent.
To an extent.
I don't like it when comedians become famous and then everyone like trolls through their years of comments and then they're like, you should apologize for this, and then they do, and you're like, what? No.
Yeah. Comedians, I think, have a pass. They can say whatever they want, in my opinion. They're comedians. If you don't like what they're saying, you can just change the channel. Our guest today is filmmaker, director, humanitarian, Faisal Attrache. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Faisal is a USC film grad, and he has an amazing short film, which I got the pleasure of seeing. It's called Growing Home, correct? And it's about it's a documentary. And it follows the life of Samir, a displaced Syrian barber who has taken refuge along with his young family in the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan. Despite filling his time with meaningful work, caring for his family, and improving his living conditions, the daily distractions cannot diminish his desire to return home. It has toured many film festivals, and it recently won Best Documentary Short at Newport Beach Film Festival, correct?
That's right.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And we were nominated in Sheffield Docs in the UK, which was our international premiere. It was kind of cool.
Wow.
Awesome.
If you get a chance to see it at a film festival or buy it off iTunes, hopefully soon, you should definitely check this out. You wrote, directed, and edited this documentary, correct?
Yeah, and produced too, co-produced with my fellow producer. You kind of have to in the indie kind of world.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the time. So yeah.
Especially when you first start off. One of the biggest things that spoke to me through the film, and it's regardless of political or religious views anyone has, it's the human identity is what spoke to me. And that's kind of the theme for today, actually. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that and just get into it. In Faisal's documentary, Samir is displaced and pushed to live in unfamiliar and a harsh environment. But even with his alien environment, him and many others open stores, decorate their living tents, and even grow gardens in a push to reclaim some sort of quality and comfort of the home they were forced to leave. This documentary made me start to think as to what identity is and why is it important. Well, first, there are many forms of identity, and it can have different meanings and weight with different forms of thought. In the social sciences, identity is a person's conception and expression of their own self and or group affiliations such as national identity and cultural identity. In philosophy, personal identity concerns change and time. For us and the listeners, let's break this down for important reasons that I will reveal at the end. Let's split identity into the superficial and the core identity. Your superficial identity relates to things everyone, including yourself, can assess from basic facts. Where you were born, where you live, who you live with, what nationality you are, what race you are, your sexual preference at times, your education to a certain extent, your job, your living arrangement, your zip code, your status in the socioeconomic levels we live in this country, middle class, poor class, the rich, your faith or religion, but only to a certain extent as well, and even the clothes you wear. The superficial identity is what we share with the world, sometimes out of choice and sometimes because of the life we were born into. The identity can be observed by most people, including yourself, and it's also how people automatically classify you when they see you and or have casual conversations with you. Now, the core identity resides in your thoughts, in your mind and heart. Your core identity are your deepest feelings, perspective on how you view the world and the people around you. Your hates, your loves, your wants, your dislikes, your true outlook on faith, God, the universe, your fears, your anxieties. The core identity can be a very, very scary place because it's your true reflection on who you are at that time. Many of us never visit our core selves because we are scared or embarrassed of who we are at that time. But as actors, artists, as humans, we must visit this place constantly in order to realize our true selves and improve on it. We also should look at why we are the way we are currently. What made us think the way we think, live the way we live? Where did we come from? Family history, cultural history. How can I improve on this? And why should I even improve on this? Finding our identity is difficult, but when we find our current core identity, it's liberating. We see the world clearer. We find obstacles not easier to overcome, but we see the path to overcome them. We ourselves become stronger. We feel more at peace. We are friendlier. We are more empathetic to people and judge less because we don't really know where they come from and why they are doing what they are doing. For actors, if you don't know your character's identity, superficial and core, how can you play them truthfully? For directors or writers, the same goes. Identity is crucial and understanding. Identity is crucial in understanding and executing your story. I want to finish off by quoting Bruce Lee, one of my favorite philosophers and artists. Knowing is not enough, you must apply. Willing is not enough, you must do. As a filmmaker, man, this growing short, I know there's
long, heavy
I know
topic.
Absolutely. But your film growing home, I keep wanting to say growing short. I don't know. Maybe it's another short film I saw. Growing short.
Growing home.
Growing home. It really made me think on these people because they're put into a really harsh place, leaving everything you think is you and going into a place that's not you. I know that it must play with your mind extremely. Is there anything that wasn't filmed that you can talk about us that really played with, like Samad, for instance, like how it affected his identity?
Yeah, definitely. I think I did include a tiny bit of that in the film, but yeah, one of the biggest things in terms of identity that I was thinking about, and more recently than actually when I was filming, I've been so I guess just a general context too for people listening. The Zaatari camp where they live is in northern Jordan. It's right along the border of Syria and Jordan up in the north. It's like 10 kilometers away. You can literally see Syria from the high points. And this camp has been around since the summer of 2012. And at one point, it was like somewhere hovering around 200,000 people.
That's a lot.
Which was, it's the second largest refugee camp in the world. And at the time, it was the fourth largest city in Jordan. I mean, like, just literally.
How big was it?
It's 1.25 square miles. It's tiny. So if you do the math, it's more concentrated than Manhattan, which is one of the densest places on earth. So yeah, it's something kind of unreal, and really you can't really experience anything like it anywhere else. But one of the things I think about for people who are older and do have their kind of defined identity, leaving Syria, it is kind of like you're leaving part of your identity for sure. And all these people who will never go back home, they will always feel like Syrian, and they will always feel like they belong to this specific geographical location on this earth. But it's crazy because the kids that grow up around there, and there's been a lot of kids born in this time period in the last 4 years, who it kind of gets me every time I go to the refugee camp, like this dirt camp, and it's dirty, and you live in a a metal box or a tent or something, but they're growing up thinking this is normal, that this is home, that my identity does belong to this place. In Syria, just the idea of home, that there is this home, is just kind of talk that their parents say. We had this home back in Syria, we had a garden here, we had this room here, whatever, but you wouldn't know that. And a lot of our identities are defined by the location we live. I mean, if you live in LA, your identity changes, whether you like it or not. I think, compared to going to New York or small town America or Europe or whatever.
At least the superficial one right away.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's always kind of adjusting to your immediate surroundings. But I think the camp, and it's probably too early to tell what the real kind of maybe long-term effects on who they are is, but there will be, without a doubt, huge effects on their psyche and their identity and who they are as people. And I'm curious to see in the coming future the identity, the sort of collective identity of Syrians, how that's going to change, because suddenly, if you're kind of familiar with refugee populations on Earth, like the Afghan refugee population was the biggest before the Syrian one, and before that the Palestinian one, and there are several other refugee populations on Earth, but it does come to define the collective identity. So now, again, for better or worse, the collective Syrian identity is going to be a refugee identity to some extent.
This is an extremely heavy topic. I know it's like early Saturday morning, but it's so crucial because us living here in America, for most Americans, that's never a concern. We never have to worry about being refugees and having to go to Canada or Mexico. And just the thought of doing something. You've got plans, Jordan? No. But it's such a life changer. And it goes back to what I was saying. Because when all those things are stripped away, your superficial identity, you're left with who you really are, I feel like. Your real fears, your real perspectives. And I know you're going to kill me. I'm still reading this book. It's called Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And I know I quote it so much recently because I'm going to finish it and never quote it again. How does that sound?
Okay.
It talks about how we have to constantly visit these deeper places in ourselves. So basically, when we're on our deathbeds, it's talking about how we must always contemplate death and think about that. So if we meet death in a kind of a slow transitional phase, we're not as anxious or scared about it. And I'm like, that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you're preparing for it, so you're okay with it. So I think it's so crucial for us to really figure out like who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. And does my bank account really show who I am? Does my quality of film work really show who I am on the inside? And did you have to figure out whenever you were in this situation with them, did it made you question your own identity at times?
Yeah, I think it makes me think about it for sure. Like, so for example, I grew up in the United States. I was born in Syria. I grew up in the United States.
Right.
But going back to the camp, I went with a crew of non-Arabs, non-Syrians. There were 2 Americans, 1 European. And going to the camp, I always define myself as Syrian American. So this hyphenated description. But going to the camp, I was, I think, pleasantly surprised to see that they saw me as Syrian. Like the actual refugees in the camp. When they see me and talk to me, they consider me Syrian, which is for me, for my personal struggle and identity,
right.
Something I really felt good about because and this is kind of a long extended conversation, but it's always been this kind of struggle, like, well, am I more Syrian, am I more American? And I growing up, I always wanted to be more Syrian. So then this kind of satisfies that a little bit, where like, oh look, I'm passing, and that I actually feel Syrian, but it kind of feels like you're kind of shaped growing up, and then once you hit, like for me, like college, for example, is a big time in my life for identity. When I think of identity, about forming identity, I guess college is like kind of a turning point where like it's you grow up and your identity. You build your identity, and I also want to say your identity is built because some of that is out of your control, I think.
Yeah.
And then the rest of your life is kind of like, well, figuring out what the hell just happened in those first 20 years before college, like kind of dissecting your childhood, dissecting your relationships, all that, and trying to figure out sort of where you are now in, after let's say after college or something. So I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is that, going to the camp did kind of make me go back and think in that way, sort of the relationship between that identity growing up, what I wanted to be, or what I considered myself to be, even though maybe it wasn't that exactly, but and what the reality of the situation was. And I think I wonder if the extreme conditions and the context of where they were.
Yeah.
I wonder if that affects how they see me, like as a Syrian or as someone coming from the outside into the camp, because a lot of the people who come from the outside into the camp are foreigners,
right?
Journalists, aid workers, whatever. So I wonder if seeing a Syrian come in from the outside to help or to talk to them or whatever, how that's different in their eyes too. So I felt a little bit of that. I felt like they were more comfortable talking to me. And I recently was back doing a workshop with teens, teaching them how to make films on their phones. And that's same awesome. Kind of thing. It was kind of amazing how they didn't even question the details about my, like, he's Syrian. That's it. Period. Whereas normally I have to go on in this long, I was born there and then I moved here and then grew up in San Francisco, blah, 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 blah. I have to like kind of do this big conditional thing. For them, it was kind of amazing how like it was really no questions asked beyond that. Like, oh, he's Syrian. That's it. Yeah.
National identity is so interesting to me.
How heritage?
Excuse me?
Like as in heritage, or
no, in terms of like your national identity, like where, like this, the country you come from, and like the like, let's take it in this country.
Stereotypes.
Well, that's one aspect of it, but like, there are people who have like very pro-America views, you know what I mean, or people who come from like, who are just proud of the country they come from. It's such an interesting set of circumstances because most of the time you don't have control of what country you're born into. I don't think anybody has control.
There's also different levels of passion. When you have like
Absolutely.
Trump versus a lot of other less extremists.
In terms of storytelling, then, how does identity play a role?
When you're making, I'm gonna go back and forth, I guess, between film and storytelling. But when you're making a film or playing a character or writing a character or something like that, I think one of the first things you need to think about is, and we started talking about nationalism, we've been talking about kind of a superficial identity. It is both of these things. It's hard to separate a person from their place.
Right.
So, like we said, wherever you are, if you're in LA or New York, let's say, for example, or you're in New York and you move to LA, it does change your identity just by being in a different place. So I think being conscious of that is so important to really understand. It's one of the first things you need to think about, I think. And whether or not, I guess, that plays into, in terms of, I don't know, I'm just kind of
please, because this is, I'm just asking like a question because I think that's so like crucial, like I'm not a writer, or I don't consider myself a director or a filmmaker, I'm an actor at the core. So, identity for me plays a huge part when I'm developing a character, at their core belief, like how they view the world. And I don't know, like if you're writing a story, or let's just focus then on this documentary you did, like the identity these people see themselves as, are they super aware of it during that time? Like in terms of I'm Syrian. I'm going back home.
Yeah, I think because it is funny. I mean, going back to storytelling, I said it is one of the first things you think about, and you kind of have to think about. But maybe in normal life, outside of the context of telling a story or acting or filmmaking, maybe you don't. I don't know. I want to just kind of venture to say that maybe you don't think about it that much.
Right.
Really, like, who am I in this deep sense? Like, it's a big thing to deal with. Like, who am I? And a lot of people aren't happy with who they are, so they don't even want to get into it in the first place. So,
it's LA.
So in terms of storytelling, yeah, I think it's important because it is the first question you ask. I mean, it's essentially, who am I? And you have to know that to move forward in telling the story. Mm-hmm. You can't move forward without knowing who's talking, whether it's a rich person in Beverly Hills or some refugee in a camp somewhere. You need to know whose point of view the story is from, which essentially has to do with identity and who it is. And I think in the camp there's a line in the film where Samir says, because when you get into the camp and you register as a refugee, you become legally a stateless person, a refugee. So you are no longer a Syrian citizen. You are now a stateless refugee.
Oh wow!
Registered
I didn't know that.
under UNHCR. So there are different laws that govern all that. So a lot of these people didn't even have passports coming out. So it's not like we wear this national identity on our sleeve. We're like, here's my passport. This is who I am.
That's so scary though.
For them, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
It's scary. I mean, for us, again, if you're used to traveling, if you're used to seeing the world and stuff, you're very aware of this. A lot of people, even in the U.S., I think percentage-wise, I don't know what the percentage is, but I know a smaller number have passports in the U.S. Mm-hmm. But people, a lot of people have never left their hometown or small town or whatever it is. True. So in that case, they're that kind of grand nationalistic identity in the context of others around the world probably doesn't exist that much.
Yeah.
But if you travel, like I'm very aware of this because I have my American passport, I have my Syrian passport. I travel on the American, but you're always like, well, in the American line, in the foreigner line, in the European line, you're always kind of like, where do you fall? And it is a very quick, superficial sort of the defining quality of identity that you're thinking of. The airport, I guess, is a big location where identity is very very present. Everyone's kind of wearing their identity, their nationalistic identity on their sleeve, which is an interesting thing to think about. I'm
sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious because I just don't know a lot about it, but like with a refugee camp being outside of whatever territory that you were from, who runs that refugee camp? Like who's is it
that's a good question.
Political? Is it governed by?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix. So the biggest administrator of the camp is kind of the local government. By local, I mean the government in which the camp of the country in which the camp exists. So Jordan would be this specific situation. There are camps in Turkey too, but it is a mix of the government, the administration, and the UN and aid workers.
Okay.
So it's a mix of those. But the final word goes to the local government. So Jordan is the one that makes the final policies, which
right.
A lot of times they're not in the best interest of the actual reality on the ground.
Yeah.
But those are they're the ones who run the actual camps.
How do you go about, like, what was your process for, I guess I don't know if it's pre-production, but to prepare to go here? Like how do you get into a location like that?
Yeah. I went on one before we actually started filming. I went on one trip by myself as a pre-production trip to see, just to kind of know what it was like and to start meeting. I wanted to interview barbers right away when I went in. And I started to meet barbers and see what it was like. And, prepping for it, I don't want to say I was prepared entirely. I thought about it. Okay, well, I'm about to go into this space and this place where people have seen crazy stuff. They've seen people die in front of them. They've seen their homes destroyed. They've seen their houses set on fire. They've seen family members that, it's just terrible, terrible trauma. I haven't experienced anything close to that. So, of course, I thought about it. I don't think I ever actually really understood or got it. And I don't know if I still understand what it's like to have gone through what I don't. I'm just gonna say I don't understand what they've actually been through in terms of having your either home destroyed or whatever, and having to flee a lot of times on foot to this place. But I guess as much as I could, I tried to put it in my head that I need to listen to these people. I need to empathize as much as possible, and also not let their suffering stick to me. And that was a piece of advice I got from I don't know how to describe him. He's kind of like this a Buddhist kind of meditation guru that my mom sees, and I had just by chance been on a retreat right before I went on the trip, and I was talking to him about it, and he said one of his pieces of advice was that go there, be open, let it all come in, but let that suffering go as soon as it hits you, and don't let their suffering cling to you, because that's just a lot to handle. And I think that was a big piece of advice. And going in there and leaving, I did actually leave kind of happier. And I think that has a lot to do with the human element to it. Going in expecting to see this crazy, suffering and terrible, suffering of children and these terrible situations and everything. But you see that, you get over it. But it's kind of crazy how you start looking for the good right away. So I left thinking of the good, frankly. I didn't really dwell on the terrible of the terrible. I was mostly thinking about the good things that I saw and the hopeful aspects of the situation and these individuals. So, and it's kind of been that way since.
Yeah.
I've been to the camp about 4 or 5 times now. And it's no longer this oh no, I'm going to the camp. It's actually, well, I know people in there now and I'm going to see these people. Yeah, it's kind of like they're in a prison, like I'm visiting someone in prison. But it is cool that these relationships exist, and I'm happy to see them, and they're happy to see me, and so the context changed. It's kind of crazy how it just makes you feel different.
On a level, sorry, I have another question.
No,
I'll just go sit outside now. No, I'm curious because on the topic of identity, with making, I always view when you're doing a documentary is sort of like creating a character in itself from the beginning. People take up to a decade to put something together and have no idea what the story was. So I was just curious, when you go in there, was there an expectation you had for a story versus where you, the process to how you got to where the actual story is now with your finished product?
Yeah, there's so when we went in, I mentioned quickly that we wanted to go in and interview barbers. The original idea was to interview several barbers and have a story kind of pieced together, like a compilation of several stories from barbers about Syria, about the situation, about being refugees. We ended up focusing on just one, and it became a character piece. And that, that kind of very organically happened, where we interviewed a bunch of barbers, and we met a lot of great people. And we did our pre-interviews and everything, and trying to figure out who's the best person to tell the story. And we met Samad, who the main subject. And when we met Samad, it was kind of clear, at least for me, and then of course in conversation with my producer, that this was the guy. He's very charming, very charismatic, kind of like the guy that you feel like you know. You can relate him to a lot of people in your life, whether it's your relatives, brothers, uncles, whatever, or neighbors maybe, or cousins. You can kind of relate them to Samad, and that's what was the kind of, for us, the big thing that made us and made me decide to go with him specifically, is that he would be a good person to tell this story. Because from the beginning I wanted to, and Wissam kind of mentioned this, it's a film that is human in its nature, in that you feel like you're understanding humanity, or you're understanding this human, or learning this story through this human. And that's what we wanted. We didn't want to kind of keep it impersonal and just have numbers and statistics and just these generalizations. We wanted to just tell the story through this guy. And in some sense, when going into it, my goal was to have this film be for a Western audience, for a non-Syrian, non-Arab audience. So, for example, when Syrians watch this film, and I've had the rare opportunities to show the film to Syrians, they're not as affected by the film as other people.
See, that's really interesting to me.
They've become desensitized. They're like, there's not enough suffering in this film. Like, what are you talking about? There's not enough they've become so desensitized. They need like a certain like fix of, not fix, I want to say, but a certain amount of like.
There's an expectation.
Yeah, they've seen people's heads being blown off in videos and stuff. So like, me talking, or this guy talking about his life and everything is just not going to do it for them, which is unfortunate, which is totally a product and a result of the conflict going on right now, which is very sad. But I think Western audiences are able to relate a lot more to the character that is presented on screen. And I think that's definitely a result of his specific personality and him being the best person to tell the story, which is, as a filmmaker, you're kind of like looking in your radar to see who that person is in the society around you.
There's a great part in the film where he says something to the effect of, and you'll probably remember it better than I will, they don't do much during the day, you know what I mean? It's like, this is our lives every day, and we try not to think of either the hopes or dreams too much. We just like what's going to happen or whatever. That's such that to me, man, that's a type of suffering, and like it's a form of hell in your mind, you know what I mean? Yeah, like there's the outside like uncomfortableness, but in your mind, that just, to me, that's such a strong suffering.
You called it hell. I call it purgatory, is what I call the refugee camp. Because imagine here, just to paint a picture now for everyone listening too, is in terms of what it might be like to be in a camp. It's a tiny space, like we said, 1.25 square miles. It's mostly tents and caravans, and everything's kind of makeshift and improvised. And one of the biggest things about being in the camp is, your food and your shelter and water, whatever, are taken care of. It's not the best food, it's not the best water, it's not that clean, but you do have those basic amenities and stuff. So you have that. But then, once you have that, what do you, as a human now, think bigger? What do you do? How do you occupy your time? Do you learn? I mean, in our lives, we take it for granted. Well, of course we have food and water and shelter and all this. And then everything after that is just supplementary to getting your food and water and surviving.
YouTube.
You just YouTube all day, exactly.
Essential.
So the question you ask yourself then is, well, if you're in a refugee camp, you have your food, water, and shelter, then what? You can't leave. In this specific camp, you can't leave. It's pretty much an open-air prison. And you can't educate your kids. You can't go explore different surroundings, take a vacation. You just can't do any of that. So that's why I call it purgatory, is that, frankly, at this point, a lot of them are literally just sitting around. They wake up in the morning,
right,
and they just sit there and do nothing. And that's the really kind of the purgatory element of it that I consider purgatory. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, but before we go, for the listener listening in on this is not a conversation on religion, on politics. At its face value, it's a humanitarian conversation about a documentary that you created that was incredible, and it's a great way of storytelling, and it's a great, as any filmmaker should watch. If you watch this film, it'll be a great example of how to correctly do a short film, especially a documentary short film. But at its core value, it's identity. And I know this is a very, very heavy subject, but as I'm growing older, hopefully wiser, I have more questions than I think I have knowledge at this point. However, identity.
Are you figuring out your identity right now?
I'm figuring out my identity. I'm just gonna cry. No,
we'll figure it out together with you.
Oh, thanks, guys. Let's hold hands while we figure it out.
We could chant a little bit.
No, it's so crucial, especially for you, the listener, as an artist, as an actor, to get into those scary places and figure out why you are the way you are, why you think the way you are. Have someone who can help you figure out the way you are, because you need help sometimes in discovering who you really are, and from there go forward, be a better actor, be a better person, because it's a scary place and you have to be truthful with yourself. And I think a lot of the times we lie to ourselves to make us feel better or to avoid a certain problem that we're facing on the inside. And if this conversation is touching you and you feel like changing it, then good. It's supposed to be affecting you in a certain way. And I urge you, if this is speaking to you, hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Facebook, let us know.
Are we ending the episode?
No, we're not. I'm just going to a quick break, but I know it's a very heavy episode, but I just want to make sure that people understand the reasoning behind it, because it does hold a lot of weight, and I'm not being very articulate this morning, but please, please, please think on it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to be talking more about Faisal's struggles in just filmmaking in general and how you overcame them, and Jordan's going to do a tap dance for us on the table, correct?
When the cameras go off, yes. It's the audio.
We'll be right back.
Cast at Talent is pleased to support Actors Anonymous. Cast at Talent, for more than a decade, we've been working to make sure that the right actor has the opportunity to compete for the right job and has the right online tools to pursue that job. The Cast at Talent online showcase, Gig Finder, major open calls like Star Wars and Jungle Book, and feedback by Cast It certified casting pros within 24 hours. CastAtTalent.com, @CastAtTalent, and Cast at Talent on Instagram or Facebook. # right actor, right job.
Put a flavored condom on your head because your mind is about to get blown.
High school is over.
Blackout party at the beach, bitches! You're legit popular.
Ah, Maddie f***ing McKevin.
You have to tell her.
I still want to be with you. You still want to be with me?
Welcome to the Enchanted Fantasy Prom. Be sure to sign up for the raffle. You could win a rainbow.
Awkward. Season 5 premiering August 31st at 9/8 Central. Only on MTV.
And we are back. Faisal, what's your experience with casting actors, and what do you look for whenever you're casting?
Good question. So the,
you like the way I phrased that?
there.
Casting.
The film we were talking about is documentary, but my focus actually is narrative. So casting is a big part of that, obviously.
Right.
And one of the biggest things. I'm just gonna jump straight into this as a director. This is speaking as a director now. When I'm casting someone in an audition, they come in. I like to see them do their own thing that they brought to it. I don't want to give them too much. There's really no need to. Small things I say are not going to make a big difference at this point. So I want to see what they do, and then my big thing, what I'm looking for is like give an adjustment, and then see what happens. And that's kind of the gold for me in terms of when I'm casting in an audition. If an actor can take that adjustment and understand it and then apply it, that for me is a big, big sign that one, it's someone I want to work with, and two, we can develop together the character. And of course, filmmaking is a collaborative process. Even as a director, I don't know exactly what's going to happen in terms of the character and the actor and everything, so you got to be open to getting that, I guess, from the actor.
Yeah,
directable. Exactly, and working with the actor to reach a point. So if a actor comes in and does a performance and takes an adjustment and then does the same performance, for example, especially because specifically in casting, I try to go pretty extreme. Like, it's not a subtle, angry versus a little more angry. It's just a lot more like angry versus completely light and comedic or something. You know what I mean? So I want to see that kind of extreme difference. And that's to me where casting is so hard. You see an actor for, minutes and you're trying to make a judgment on whether or not they're a good actor, whether they'd be good to work with, whether they're a good character, whether you can adjust them on set and work with them on set. You know what I mean? So you have all these things to judge, and it becomes easier over time, of course, in terms of the more people you see, you start to know. But as character, in terms of character, one of the biggest things I look for is this adjustment, and it's not, as a director and as someone, I guess, on the other side of the table, let's say, in any audition, you're not trying to screw over the actor. You're not trying to
you're not
hurt.
Wait.
Yeah, it's a misconception. No, it's you want them to succeed. You want them to do well because from your point of view, you're sitting there all day looking at these actors and you want to see someone that blows you away. And I'm sure, a lot of people have heard this before, but it's true in that the people behind the table want you to succeed because in the end you're making something together. It's not I guess one of the big things too is that for an actor coming into an audition, everything is in that room and the film exists for them in that room and that time and space. For a director, it's just a tiny part of it. You know what I mean? So all the weight on this specific moment is not that big.
Right.
So you are trying to just find another piece to add to your film. You know what I mean?
It's incredible because what you're saying has been echoed by other directors and producers we've had on the show. In terms of, you just gave me this weird smile. No, it just.
It's true.
It is true. Yeah.
Actually, it's sort of like in relation to what we're talking about too. Is when you're looking at someone and you're in that tight time constraint, and I mean, we've already discussed with as many actors as we've had on the show how difficult auditioning can be for an actor. Is sort of hearing the other side of it, saying it's not enough time to get to know somebody, but if someone can take that direction, can put it in a different direction, put a different spin on something, and by you giving it to them and seeing where they go with it, it's in itself creating, I would imagine, well, as a director too, because I produce stuff, but you see the way a character could be portrayed. Right. Something that you haven't put into your character that someone else is doing, that a lot of times, and we've had this with other people on the show too, where they've said, we were in the casting room, we waited for this person to sit down, and all of a sudden when they did it, we were like, what is happening right now? This is amazing. This is something I never even thought of with a character, that you kind of just go like, holy crap, like this person needs this role. That it's kind of like the added benefit of seeing how someone can take what you have in your head and create it in a way you never thought of.
What I like to do to separate myself from everybody else who comes in the room is after I'm done auditioning, I give them a 600-page biography on me so they get to know me a little bit.
Shredded that. Every single copy. Stop giving those to me every time we meet here.
The directors are like, oh, perfect.
Read it.
Get straight to this.
Any stories of bad auditions you could share with us on the podcast?
Oh, man, yeah.
Names and phone numbers.
It's just funny to see how like some people are just on a different page, and it's, I guess, going into an audition, and this is just kind of I'm just speaking like as I guess a recommendation. Don't weigh too much on any one particular aspect of it, or don't give weight to, like, for example, the particular audition. There is this scene where the character is like air guitaring. You know, like he's like with his hands just kind of like fake playing a guitar. And I wanted that for like the intro coming into the scene. You know what I mean? He's playing the guitar and saying his lines. And this actor got so stuck on that he did this air guitar thing the entire the entire scene. And I told him like, it's, you know, you don't have to. And I gave him an adjustment and whatever. But he, for some reason, kept this air guitar thing going throughout the whole scene and wouldn't stop. Like, even after I gave different directions or changed it. So it was, I'm just sitting there like, this is ridiculous. He's like saying like these lines while air guitaring the entire time. Yeah.
So much.
So I'm, it's not about getting stuck on any one particular element of it. I mean, in the end, the performance is a product of many things. So
that's good. That's very well put.
Yeah. So don't forget the big picture.
Do you have any pet peeves as a filmmaker?
I think for a lot of filmmakers, and being on set too, it just comes down to don't be an asshole.
It's really exactly. I was literally like, don't have an ego. That's
it's really that simple. And I've heard this so many times. We can say and talk all we want about film philosophy and all this, but if you're someone that nobody wants to work with, I mean, it's just as simple as that. It's like, really, it doesn't really matter. There are so many people doing this, and so many great minds and fun people to be around, that like you might be great, you might make great films, but it's not all about the means to the end kind of thing. Like, as long as we make this film, it is a process. We do live our lives in this, you know what I mean? It's not something I'm just going to one day and that's it. No, I'm usually in this for months. So the biggest thing I think is just to be kind and respectful to others. And when someone isn't, that's just kind of the worst. That's the worst thing, Right. So sort of a pet peeve, more of a character quality or trait.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think that's the biggest thing I think of. I'll let you know if I think of anything kind of smaller and more minutia than that in terms of what makes me.
No, you don't like green shirts.
Yeah, for example.
No, I'm kidding. I know a lot of independent filmmakers or independent artists or actors have trouble sometimes forming together a project for various reasons. Do you think it's? How do you? I guess not. Who do you surround yourself with? But do you think it's important? Like, you find a good stable team of like a producer or like a writer or director. Is like, you're obviously the director, but like for up and coming people who want to create their own content.
Yeah. I think, and I'm still doing this. I haven't. I guess the goal, is to find this all-star team. And I've been thinking lately, because I do produce as well, and Jordan can probably add to this too, is that as a producer, you're always trying to build a dream team, pretty much, for any project that you do, especially if it's more of a passion project or something personal.
Is this true, Jordan?
Yes.
Jordan might want to add or change some things, but in general, when you find those people who are like the all-stars, you want to bring them back together on a project kind of thing. So for me, even as a director too, it is about finding those people, picking them out, and then working together on a project. So it's making a dream team, and a lot of it is about who you surround yourself. Who you surround yourself with. One of the big things about film school, and this is a big like debate, like 50% yes, 50% no. Say go to film school. I went to film school. I went to USC, did my master's, and I think it was for me totally worth it. Again, everyone's different, but the thing about, for example, USC is the benefit of the lateral network that is created. So, which means the peers and your colleagues and the fellow students. That's the network that's gold that everyone refers to. It's not so much, I'm not going to go talk to any executive or anything. I mean, you might get some help in that sense. Like, they might have a meeting with you or something because you went to the same film school, but you're not going to, it's very rare that you really get everything from that network. It's mostly this lateral network where you kind of go up together or get jobs from your peers kind of together. So a lot of it is about who you surround yourself with. And frankly, I think everyone in life, like, why would you not surround yourself with the best people, or who you can learn from, who you want to maybe, certain things about them that you want to rub off on you, to be fun, to be whatever. Just it's kind of goes like that in film too, where I want to be around people who, on set or in this creative process are gonna feed me and take me higher and bring me with them and teach me things as much as I teach them things, so it's a give and take. And that's kind of what the ideal situation is. Most of the time that's not the case, and most of the time you work with who you have to work with. But I'm just kind of, again, in an ideal world, that would be the case. And when we all get there, we can be a little more picky, I think. But, this whole, the most of the time, that is this process of becoming a filmmaker and actor. No, you're going to work with all kinds of people.
Gotcha.
The dream is to be, the dream is to be the Muppets. Because they just always come back. They're like, we're doing another movie. And they do that in the movie. Like, you have to just want to be like, it's family. You want the same people over and over again. Like a TV show. You've been on Awkward how many seasons? Like, is it not like a big percentage of those people just feel like family every time you're there?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is that how it? They're all listening right now.
Absolutely.
No, in TV, that's how they do it. Showrunners tend to pick up, the shows. They pick everybody that they want to staff it. Or, I mean, they don't just pick it up, but like once that staff is set for season 1 and it continues on, you have a community of people that you have to rely on, that you feel like you can rely on, and there's nothing better than like when you have a project getting ready and you know that everybody that you've worked on the last 2 or 3 that they're like, we're getting the band back together.
Now I'm a little confused. Are you saying we should have Muppets in our movies? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying like any opportunity to hang out with the Muppets, I'm down. But
okay.
That wasn't what I was saying. But
I know.
But they I guess the Muppets sometimes violate the asshole rule. So
right.
I don't know about the Muppets.
That's true.
That's a scary world to live in. An asshole Muppet.
But
that's right.
Moving aside from asshole Muppets, really quickly, I just wanted to say that it sounds, thinking back to what I was just saying, it sounds like so generic and so cliche. But it's funny how I've come to realize this, that the answer is yeah. And in some funny way, they are these generic stereotypes. But it's kind of about finding your specific answer or something specific that resonates with you in this generalization.
Mm-hmm.
So, I do say, you're always trying to build a dream team, don't be an asshole, like these very generic things, but that's because it's kind of on you to figure out what that means. It sounds like, again, so cliche when someone says that, but it's on you to figure out what resonates with you in the real world in terms of that specific big idea or whatever it is. Does that make any sense? I'm still talking
No.
generalization.
No, what you just said before, we still have a little bit of time, but before we go, this is like the last thing I want to talk about with you. What has growing home done for you personally? I know as actors, as artists, whenever we want to create that film or do that role, yes, the money will come in and then more notoriety and hopefully more jobs after that. Great. That's wonderful. But what has it done for you personally as a person?
Yeah, good question. Growing home since I made it, and this is, of course, I started this process in the summer of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
It's now 2 years later. As a young kind of up and coming kind of filmmaker, I haven't done that much. So this very much defines what I've done and who I am as a filmmaker right now in this point in my life.
Right.
And not only in the filmmaking aspect, but also, this is a very specific topic, Syrian refugees. Mm-hmm. So I did this film. I was like, I'm Syrian. I need to go tell the story. And then after I did and it was done, suddenly my life and refugees became kind of intertwined in a way I didn't expect. So I never expected to go back to the refugee camp a million times after that first time. You know what I mean? I went, I was like, I'm going to go shoot this film. And then since then, I've been back to the camp, I think 3 times. And the last time I taught a 3-week workshop there for teens. So I never expected that. And that's all kind of a result. If I didn't do the film, I wouldn't have done that. I've been all over the world traveling with the film at festivals too. But on top of that, I've also gotten to show the film in context of like, whether it's schools or education or politics. Like it did screen for the UN in Geneva. I did go to different conferences and show the film more like political and conferences and stuff. So there is a space and a place for this film that is outside of the film world that I've gotten to enter and go through. And that's purely a product of the subject matter and what this film is. And thankfully it was, somewhat well done. So people want to see it, there's value to it. But without the film, no way, I wouldn't be doing any of those things. So in that respect, it's had a big impact in my life. And for me specifically, besides, giving me, a little ounce of credibility as a filmmaker, because in the end, as a filmmaker, you make the film and the legitimacy comes from somewhere else and not from you. It's kind of like the reaction to the film or festival awards or anything like that. So, for me, the film's the film, but it's when it's at a festival or like, oh, you got into another festival. That feels like legitimacy for me. I'm like, oh, someone actually thinks this film is worth seeing. So that is a nice product of making this film. But the bigger thing is, I did grow a lot as a person.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing I got out of this is that my world clashing with the refugee world, you can't help but learn from that experience. It's really a big.
Oh yeah, you're forced to learn.
Yeah, you're forced to learn, and I think my outlook on life has changed from that for the better, in a sense of I have a different understanding of what is valuable in my life from this experience. Yeah,
it's amazing how these type of life-changing experiences just open up our perspective just a little bit more because there's so much more in the world to see and experience, especially with human interactions. Faisal, before we go, do you have one piece of advice for the struggling artist, filmmaker, or actor in general?
I think it's more about looking, and my advice is more about working on yourself than anything you can actually do in the film world. I think it's about understanding yourself first. So acting in film is this big, thing you want to do. It is a job. It is this passion. It is whatever it is. But in the end, you have this relationship with yourself, and working on that relationship and understanding who you are as a person,
right?
Especially as an actor, because you're going to be jumping around from character to character. But to understand who you are and answer questions between you and yourself, the hard questions, developing that and doing that is just important as kind of moving forward in the film world. So and in a weird way, the better you know yourself and the better you are able to answer these tough questions, the better you're going to do in everything else, frankly, because it's just following truth. And again, talking in abstracts and generalizations, but you need to figure out how that specific idea resonates with you to really understand it. So I'm sure you're going to hear, anyone will hear these generalizations all the time, but I think everyone keeps repeating them because those specific people have found that specific way of interpreting and understanding that idea. Mm-hmm. And the only way to describe it then becomes in these generalizations.
Absolutely.
So yeah, work on yourself, know yourself, understand yourself first, and then you can move on to other things in a much clearer way about what you want and what you want to do.
Absolutely. Faisal, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have any, you have upcoming projects next year, correct?
Yeah. Part of which are documentaries, still sticking with Syrian refugees, and also narrative project that is a historical period piece about my great-grandfather, who was the leader of the Great Syrian Revolt in 1925 against the French. Yeah. So that's kind of like, I think... not in the epic scale of Lawrence of Arabia, but that kind of time period and subject matter.
It's amazing, man. Yeah. Well, best of luck. We'll definitely keep our eyes open. If you're on Twitter, if people want to follow you or ask you questions.
I am on Twitter. You can follow me, ask questions, or on Facebook or something. My Twitter handle is Faisal Attrache, my name.
Cool. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Of course. Jordan.
Always a pleasure.
Are you all right? You just look a little cozy right now in your flannel.
I'm gonna take a nap.
You're gonna take a nap?
Good.
Before you take a nap, what's your Twitter handle?
Jordan Burbank 7.
Good night.
Twitter.
Nicole, thanks for sound engineering and for all the work you do. If people want to find you on the interweb, what's your handle again? Oh gosh.
She's freaking out.
Nikki592. I don't know if this is on. Nikki592.
Yeah, we can hear you. That's awesome. Big thanks to GVB Studios. Also, big thanks to Cast It Talent. Cast It is the exclusive partner to Cast It Network of more than 10,000 of Hollywood's top casting directors, producers, directors, and studio execs. You can find me at WeSamKish, Twitter, and Facebook.
# right actor, right job.
That's true for Cast It Network. Right actor, right job.
Always forget that.
I have it written down.
I know.
I don't know why I don't read it.
# right actor, right job.
Yeah. # right actor, right job. I'm making up now for all the times.
Keep saying it. Just keep saying it.
You can find us, actorsanonymouspodcast.com, and our Twitter handle at podcastaa. Tweet us your questions, your concerns, your likes, your dislikes, what your mom made you for breakfast this morning.
What you're wearing.
What you're wearing. That's...
No.
No.
Never mind. Take it back.
And always remember to listen, think, and then talk.